All right, 6 o'clock on the dot. We're prompt. So let's call to order with a roll call, please.
Beckman? Here. Miller?
Here.
McLean?
Here.
That was easy. Quick reminder just to silence telephones so that we don't get any interruptions during the meeting. We also will have a recording secretary, Mr. Nadler. Can we get approval of agenda? Any additions or deletions?
I move we approve the agenda for the September 19th meeting as presented.
I'll support.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? How about approval of minutes from the September 17th, 2018 meeting?
I see one correction.
Okay.
Election of the chair and vice chair. I'll put the blame on Jane. She made the motion to elect you, and I seconded. We have it backwards. Nothing that pressing, but just want to point the finger at Jane.
I appreciate that.
Well, you appreciate that.
What do you want to hate me?
So with that correction, any other corrections? Any motion to approve that amendment?
I'll make a motion to approve with the said correction.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Yes.
Opposed? We have no unfinished business, so moving into new business, we have a public hearing. Before we open that, I just wanted to level set on some expectations, which I did print, but then I forgot at home, so I'll just read it off my phone. So quickly, just expectations from the board as we move into this hearing is, number one, we promise to listen closely to both presentations, to carefully consider both presentations, to remain objective and focus on the facts. We're looking at a code and what applies under the code and what does not. And then last, to provide respect to everyone here. From the presenters and speakers, we ask that you be concise. We are not going to provide time limits, but still we have other things to do in life. So keep it concise, which I'm sure you will. Focus on facts, and then also provide respect to everyone here. And then quick expectations from the meeting itself is under IFC 108.2, our authority is limited to determining if the code is applied correctly or if any alternatives are viable that still meet code. However, we do not have authority to waive code requirements, so that's something you need to keep in mind. We can't change the code, we can't waive requirements. We're just here to say if the code is applied correctly or if there are alternatives that will still work under the code. And finally, we may or may not be able to come to a decision within this meeting. I think for everyone's sake, we hope that we can. But if more facts or conversation is needed, we'll work to do so quickly after the meeting so that we can come to a prompt but accurate decision. So that's all I had. With that, we have a motion to officially open public hearing to consider the appeal of Build SB LLC.
I will make a motion to officially open the hearing to consider the appeal of Building SB LLC.
I'll second.
All in favor of opening public hearing?
Aye.
All opposed? So with that, we can open the hearing. We'll start first with a presentation by the applicant or their designee. Follow that with a presentation by the fire code official or their designee. And then we will have discussion or presentation by other parties if anyone wants to, and then discussion after that. So let's start first with a presentation by the applicant.
Thank you. My name is Carl Gabriels. I'm here on behalf of Build SB, the owner of the property, and the applicant and appellant in this case. Excuse me. And with the chair's comments about keeping it civil and respectful, so forth, I guess I will just premise my comments by saying, obviously we're here because we disagree with a decision made by the fire chief, and I will do my best and try and communicate the respect while still disagreeing with him. It's not a personal attack; it's a disagreement with this decision. So if I say something that suggests otherwise, that's not my intention. Before jumping into, I guess, the heart of this, wanted to mention the idea of the authority that you had just mentioned because of a comment made at the organizational meeting on Monday where someone had at least said the word advisory, as if, questioning just because this is a new board, what's its function, what's its authority, what does it do? And so I just wanted to point out the ordinance, Saugatuck Township ordinance, which establishes this board for purposes of appeals in that township. And it says to hear and decide appeals of orders, decisions, determinations made by the fire code relative, et cetera, to the application and interpretation of the code. So that's just to clarify that our reading of the ordinance says that this board, its purpose is to serve as not simply an advisory role, but as an appeal board to review, to either accept or reject a decision that was made. With that, ultimately, in a nutshell, our request is that this appeal board determine that the fire chief misapplied the code by not using NFPA 1142, the National Fire Protection Association Standard 1142, which applies to rural and suburban areas that don't have municipal water at the location of the property. In a nutshell, that's it. To give you a little roadmap on what I plan on doing would be to highlight the code sections, both in the IFC, International Fire Code, and in this NFPA 1142. Then to identify 3 ways in which we believe the chief misapplied those code sections. And third, to offer you our interpretation of how the analysis should go. So with that, I'll move right in. So really what we're talking about here is a water supply. That's the issue here. There's lots of things in the fire code about access and so forth, but what we're at issue here today is water supply. And so the IFC 5071 says an approved water supply capable of supplying the required flow for fire protection shall be provided. It's that simple. The code then goes on and describes that there can be multiple types of acceptable water supplies: reservoirs, pressure tanks, water mains, etc. And then on a related topic, it says where any portion of a facility or building is more than 400 feet from a hydrant, the property owner must essentially extend the water main onto their property and put a hydrant so that no portion of the building is more than 400 feet from that hydrant. So the typical example of that, I believe, would be where you have a really deep lot. You've got a building that's way in the back. And so there's a part of the building that's more than 400 feet from where a hydrant is sitting in the road right-of-way, in the public domain there. And so somebody would have to extend the water main onto their property and put a fire hydrant. But the International Fire Code makes exceptions to these requirements of an approved water supply in cases of rural and suburban areas where there isn't municipal water. And so in IFC B103.3, it says, for information regarding water supplies for firefighting purposes in rural and suburban areas in which there is not an adequate and reliable supply system, the fire code official is authorized to utilize NFPA 1142. And this comes down to the main crux of our disagreement. Now, to determine if something's rural or suburban, the NFPA 1142 gives us these definitions. Rural is less than 500 persons per square mile. Suburban is 500 to 1,000. In those areas, instead of talking about approved water supply, the term used in the NFPA 1142 is alternative water supplies. The NFPA gets creative and gives a creative and fire department with the expertise to find water basically anywhere it can in those situations where there's not the standard fire hydrant just sitting there. And that includes transporting water to those sites. NFPA 1142 7.1.5, in locations where adequate municipal type water systems are not provided, minimum water supplies shall be established in or transportable to the designated area. The NFPA even goes further and gives guidance to a fire department on how to calculate what they can bring to a scene. The fire department operating without a water system has the following three means of getting adequate water. One, from supplies at or near the incident scene. And I'll highlight these, number 2 and 3, from supplies transported to the scene, and by relaying water from a source to the fire scene using large diameter hose. The NFPA even goes one further on number 2 there, the transporting water to the scene, and provides even more suggestions and guidance, giving the department, mentioning these 2 factors to consider. The amount of water carried on initial responding units is of course important, as well as the amount of water that can be continuously delivered after initial response. And if you continue down to the bottom then, you can see that a lot of agencies can deliver over 1,000 gallons per minute if they have several mobile water supply apparatuses. And I'm sure anybody here that's wearing a fire uniform can explain how that is done, where you have a relay where one tanker goes, empties, another one gets filled, and they take turns pumping water on the fire. So those are the code sections that we believe are relevant. The first misapplication that we believe occurred in this case is the fire chief improperly mandating that Bill SB extend municipal water to the property. Water does not exist at this property. To show you on the map here, this is a lot of these photos are going to be from the Allegheny County GIS system, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. The property is actually an oblong shape right here. It's the boundaries of this box here are being adjusted, so it's going to be somewhere up here. Okay, the water main is down here on Blue Star. So you know, that number is kind of to the middle of the lot. It's probably 1,200 feet to the closest point of the lot, but do you have
May I just got a question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
There is another hydrant up there, up the road on 65th.
Yes.
It's not on the map though, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I
I believe it's across private, other people's property, I believe. So my understanding is this is the closest
public.
one. In other words, the other one would have to, and I don't know where it is, and I'm open to appointing it. Yes.
I think it's right
Right at the entrance, right at the...
Right about there, I
right
believe.
about there where the dunes rides are. Should be right
It's
about
just
there.
before his drive,
And
I
I think,
believe.
actually, I think it's in this parcel right here. It's right
Okay.
there.
Okay, thank you. So there is no municipal water to this site, either to the private easement driveway at where it's going to meet the property, or even where the private easement driveway hits a public right-of-way. So when this plan was submitted for approval to the township, which it was approved for the buildings, it did not have any water mains on it because it's going to be well water. There's no municipal water. When it was reviewed by the chief, it came back with an instruction that detail of water mains needed to be added to it. My client went back to the chief and said, there's not water there. We think you should really analyze this under 1142 because there is not water to the property. And here's the response that was given back from the fire chief. This standard only applies, talking about NFP 1142, when reliable water systems do not exist. In the case of this property, a reliable water supply system does exist. There's a reliable water supply on both Blue Star Highway and on 65th Street. And for support for that, the chief pointed to zoning ordinance section 20-199. If water transmission lines are reasonably proximate to the subdivision within 2,700 feet of the subdivision, the township board may, in its discretion, require the subdivider to participate in and share in whole or in part the cost of extending such transmission lines to the subdivision. And then the bold is from the chief. The proposed development at this property is within 2,700 feet of the water mains on both Blue Star and 65th Street. So then, in this letter, the chief reiterates the demand that the owner include water main detail. In other words, we need to extend this to the property. Now, but let's look at that ordinance section a little bit more. Notice that it says who has the discretion to require somebody to extend the water main. It says the township board. It doesn't say the fire chief. It doesn't give the fire chief that authority. And notice who it can require to extend the water main. A subdivider. Subdivider is a term of art which does not apply in this case. So we have someone else has the authority to require extending the water main under certain circumstances, and this does not apply. And the township confirmed that. As an initial matter, section 20-199 of the Township Code does not apply to this proposed development. That section is located in a chapter of the code entitled Subdivision Regulations, and by its terms, it applies only to subdividers. Build SB LLC is not requesting a split land, and as a result, the Township Board cannot use section such and such to require a water main extension. So how this worked was the fire chief told us, you need to extend the main, and here's the authority for it. Section 20-199. The township says, hold on, that's our authority to do that, not yours. And by the way, it doesn't even apply. And the fire chief says, we're going to demand it anyway. It remains the position of the fire district that an adequate and reliable municipal type water system does exist. And we're going to require you to extend it. I think it's important to point out, however, there's a few locations in the township where this has not been interpreted and applied like this. If you notice this aerial, this is just south of the fire station. This is the self-storage here. And if you see this on the GIS system always is a little bit lagging, when the pictures are. So there's actually a building here, and it extends from here to within maybe, I don't know how many feet of that building, but it's pretty close. And in that analysis, the fire chief has a system here where he goes through and, for example, section 11 says a hydrant is required within 400 feet. That's a cite from the International Fire Code. And then in bold, he responds to how that's met or not met. And so his response to that section about a fire hydrant within 400 feet is, a 12-foot fire hydrant access lane shall be added in the location pictured below to minimize the distance between the hydrant and the new structure. It doesn't say it's within 400 feet. It just says we're going to add an access lane. So here's what's proposed. This is part of the letter from the chief. We'll have this access road to access the building that's down there and shorten the distance from the fire hydrant that's around here. But it's not 400 feet. It's more than 500, more than 580 feet to get down the access road as they suggest and around the back. Either way, you have to get around the back out to around the outside of the building. So in the township, we have a building that's approximately 500 feet away from municipal water, more than 400 feet from a hydrant. There's no requirement that municipal water be extended. There's no requirement that hydrants be installed. 3295, Blue Star Highway. Down the road a little further and to the east, there's this is being cleared for a pole barn right now. And in the letter, if you look at this review from the chief, it doesn't even cite that 400 feet. That section is remarkably absent from this review. But it does say an approved water supply, and it says approved. A fire hydrant for fire suppression is readily available and located on the correct east side of Blue Star Highway. He even cites that it has 1,200 gallons per minute of flow. And an additional access agreement is in place. The access agreement in place is because to get there, you'd have to go across someone else's property from the hydrant. But it's still more than 400 feet. No requirement that they extend the water main, no requirement that hydrants be installed. 2892 Blue Star Highway. Storage units down, this is in the village of Douglas, but of course within the jurisdiction of this fire district. It's over 1,000 feet, and I don't know exactly where the fire hydrant is here, so I just put it as if it's right at the entrance to that road. But it's over 1,000 feet to the back of that building. Now, we've asked for this review from the fire district. We had talked to the city, village of Douglas, and they had called over here and said, somebody can come pick it up to see the review. We have not been given that review. So I would suggest that you as members of the Board of Appeals might have a better chance of getting that review than I might. But what we know is the building is approximately 1,000 feet from municipal water, certainly more than 400 feet from the hydrant. We don't know why that was approved, even though if you apply the code as is being interpreted for my client, it certainly would not comply. The second misapplication that we believe has occurred here is that the fire chief is refusing to allow us, Build SB, to select the water supply of its choice. Just, again, these are the same letters where it says, please include the water main detail and hydrant locations in revised submittals. But the fire code doesn't say you must use a water main. It gives choices. The fire chief has not given us that choice. In the written reviews, it says include water main details, period. The third misapplication, we believe, is that the fire chief is ignoring the rural location of Build SB's property. Now, as noted, that is the question that determines whether the IFC and the approved water supply requirements are applicable, or whether it's NFPA 1142 alternative water supply standards that are applied. And the chief has indicated that NFPA 1142 is a standard for areas in which adequate and reliable water supplies do not exist. Despite the township's comments that this is that there is not water and that we can't extend the water main, it still, as indicated, it remains the position of the fire district that an adequate and reliable municipal water supply exists. So the key question is this a rural and suburban area? We know there's not water to the property. The township's given us that information. The population in 2015, 3,067 residents. Saugatuck Township has 22.89 square miles. It comes out to just under 134 persons per square mile. So we fall squarely in and well below the cutoff for rural. In fact, the population would have to quadruple for us to be even into the suburban. So 1142 is very applicable to Saugatuck Township properties. And the township has told us that, and the township has told the fire chief that. in a memo from this township. This township attorney has indicated that NFPA 1142 can be considered with respect to this parcel because the proposed development is approximately 1,200 feet from the closest existing water main. Here's a property, 28940 Blue Star Highway, in which the chief chose to apply 1142. NFPA 1142. He chose to apply it to this property. Here's the review. Per NFPA 1142, a dry hydrant shall be provided with a minimum pond water supply. So he's going to NFPA for interpretation and determination as to the water supply. And he makes a recommendation. The fire department strongly recommends considering installing a wet pressurized hydrant connected to the municipal water system, but he doesn't require it. But here's the remarkable thing, is this property is on Blue Star Highway. There's municipal water at this property. And still it gets treatment under NFPA 1142. It's more than 750 feet from, assuming that there is even a hydrant directly across from that entrance road, it's more than 750 feet. What they do have is a pond in the back, but you can see this little apparatus access road that was created here, and assuming that the dry hydrant is here rather than here, it's at the closest place possible just for measuring. Even to get to these corners, you're over 500 feet. You're going to be even more to get to this side. So neither of the water supplies are within the required distance. So the building's more than 750 feet from municipal water, 200 feet from the hydrant, 400 feet from the hydrant, more than 400 feet from the dry hydrant. The fire chief applies NFPA 1142, no requirement that municipal water be extended or that hydrants be installed, and he suggests that the owner hook up to municipal water. He doesn't require it. All this, even though the property is serviced by municipal water at the road. So how should this property be analyzed? It should be analyzed under NFPA 1142. And in NFPA 1142, after a calculation is done about the total water that's required to fight a fire, and that's just a number to start with, you make the calculation of the water delivery rate. So anything over 20,000 gallons, total water supply based on this calculation, is 1,000 gallons per minute is what you require for a specific property. Now, we disagree with the fire chief's calculation of that number. He has a number of like 192,000 gallons. Our perspective, calculating using information from our engineers on the type of building, the classifications and the use and everything, should be somewhere between 40 to 60,000. We're not necessarily going to argue through that tonight because the number is over 20,000. So it equals 1,000 gallons per minute. Just wanted to make sure everybody follows where we get there. And the NFPA tells us that the fire department, in figuring out how it can provide water to the scene, needs to consider these three things. And I highlight again number 2 and 3, transporting water to the scene and relaying water from a source to the fire scene using a high diameter hose. Now, Mr. Beckman asked the fire chief to conduct this analysis of, please just assume that 1142 and NFPA 1142 applies, and do that calculation. And here was the response back from the chief. We could not achieve the required fire flow relying solely on the department's 2 tankers and the hydrant proposed. I would respectfully submit that is not a complete or a good faith answer. And here's why. The fire chief has indicated that he has these pumping capacities. He's got trucks that can pump 1,250 gallons a minute, 1,500 gallons a minute, 2,000 gallons per minute. All of these carry water on board. We also have 2 tankers, I believe, 2 tankers that hold 3,000 gallons per minute. I'll ask if there's a correction on that.
3,000 gallon tankers.
Okay.
Not per minute, but just tankers.
Yes, tankers that hold that much.
Correct.
Half capacity.
Yes, thank you. His answer also ignores the fact that in place are automatic aid agreements between other municipalities. If there's an alarm in Saugatuck Township, 3 other municipalities will send trucks and firepersons, excuse me. And here's what would show up on the scene. So, including the 2 tankers that you guys have, and the 3 pumpers, including the tower, Fenville sends a pumper and a tanker. Ganges sends a pumper, a tanker, and a super sucker pumper. I don't know what that is, but it sounds really cool. And Graskip would send a pumper, a tower, and a tanker. And in this earlier email, or letter, excuse me, talking about one of the properties on Blue Star Highway, we see that the chief indicates that the fire hydrants on that water main on Blue Star Highway pump over 1,200 gallons a minute. And just to step back, here is a diagram in NFPA 1142. This just illustrates for you the world that we're in. When we're talking about rural and suburban areas, I mean, the creativity that is given and requested and in fact demanded of a fire department that operates in a rural district is illustrated here. I mean, here we've got water, whether that's a pool or a pond. It's pumped into a holding tank. A pumper fills a tanker. The tanker drives down the road, or the apparatus access drive. Discharges into another portable tank. The pumper pumps from there and supplies hoses to the firemen. Okay, so that's the type of creativity for alternative water sources that the NFPA 1142 suggests and, in fact, demands in a rural setting. So here is the question. Can the fire chief deliver water to the property at a rate of 1,000 gallons per minute? Now remember, NFPA says to consider those 3 things, and I've highlighted those 2 a number of times: transporting water and relaying water. So, water transported to the scene. We've got Saugatuck Township showing up with 2 tankers. We've got Fenville showing up with a tanker. We've got Ganges showing up with a tanker. And Graskip showing up with a tanker. So there are going to be 5 tankers on scene. You have, as they've pointed out, 2 hydrants nearby. Saugatuck Township has 2 or 3 pumpers, whether you consider the tower a pumper or not. Fenville has a pumper. Ganges has 2 pumpers. Graskip has a pumper. So you've got 6 or 7 pumpers. Now, even if you need to relay the water from those hydrants, you know, hose of 750 feet, and then put a tanker in there to boost the gallons per minute again, and send it another 750 feet, you have more than enough equipment to supply 1,000 gallons per minute to this property. That's how this property should have been analyzed, and that's how this property should have been approved as submitted. Not with a requirement that we extend the water main under Blue Star Highway and 1,200 to 1,500 feet to the property, but based on the capacity that the fire chief has at his disposal every time a fire alarm goes off in Saugatuck Township. I'm going to hand you questions that I would propose this board needs to ask and answer. First of all, Does the fire chief have the authority to require that Build SB extend the municipal water service to its property? We would suggest that the answer is no. We've looked at that ordinance. The township board, Saugatuck Township Board, can under certain circumstances, but not the fire chief. Even the township board cannot do so in this case because Build SB is not a developer. The statute does not apply. The second question, can the fire chief mandate which type of water supply Build SB chooses to satisfy the International Fire Code? No. The IFC allows for many different types of water supplies. That's under the International Fire Code, and I would suggest that, in fact, we can, to some degree, ignore those two questions and move to the third and fourth, because that's where we believe it should be analyzed. Should NFPA 1142 be applied to the property? The answer is yes. To get to that yes, there's two sub-questions you ask. Is the property located in a rural and suburban area? Yes. Saugatuck Township has a population density of approximately 134 persons per square mile. That's well below the rural definition in the NFPA. Is the property serviced by municipal water? No. There is no municipal water, either at the property itself, in the private drive easement, or where the private drive easement hits 135th Avenue. There is not municipal water. So when we get to NFPA 1142 then, the final question is, does the fire district have the ability to draft 1,000 gallons per minute at the property without requiring them to extend the water main? And the answer is yes, as we've shown here. From supplies transported to the scene, yes, the fire district has at least 5 tanker trucks at its disposal with at least 2 fire hydrants less than 2,000 feet away. It could relay 1,000 gallons per minute, no problem. And what about by relaying water to the scene? Yes, the fire district has at least 6 or 7 pumper trucks at its disposal with at least 2 fire hydrants less than 2,000 feet away. It can relay water from those as well. For those reasons, we would ask this board reject the decision that the chief made, and for you to rule that this property should be analyzed under NFPA 1142, excuse me, and that once you look at what the fire district has at its disposal, you will conclude that the fire district can unequivocally supply 1,000 gallons per minute to this property without the need to mandate that they extend the water. The other examples we've shown indicate that we are not being treated like other property owners. We're asking for an accurate and appropriate application of the fire code and of NFPA 1142. Unless you have any questions for me, that's all I have at this time. I would ask for the opportunity, if there's anything that needs to be responded to respond to it after the fire chief has presented his matter to you. Any questions?
Thank you. Next, move into presentation by the fire code official or designee.
Alternate.
Okay.
Sir, is that going to be out of the way for you?
Yeah, the cable.
Oh, okay. Yep. my client just pointed out a typo on here. In the answer to the first question, Build SB is not a divider. I typed in developer.
We've never done that before.
Yeah. Ready to go, Sam? First of all, thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance to present our side of the case and where we came to the determination based on our interpretation of both the IFC and NFPA 1142. As you know, we are both highly qualified to conduct plan reviews and interpret fire codes. There's plenty of qualifications there on the screen, but I think probably the most important is that we're 2 of 1,200 certified plans examiners in the world right here in Saugatuck, so that's kind of cool that you have that much available to you. As you know, our mission statement is to minimize community risks and improve the quality of life for everyone within the fire district. And to follow that mission statement, we hold the safety of the community and everyone as a top priority when we do all of our plan reviews, inspections, and responding to emergencies. So, the plan review process. Plans are submitted to the fire district by the builder, the developer, property owner. We conduct the plan review with appropriate IFC or NFPA checklist as appropriate, and then we provide, as you've seen tonight, written plan reviews that include approval or denial or the particular outline code sections. We do this utilizing plan review forms. This was an original site plan review form based on the 2009 edition of the IFC provided by the International Code Council. We're currently using an amended, or a current version based on the 2015 edition of the IFC, so very similar as you can see. The importance of utilizing these plan review forms is we ensure that all codes are applied consistently and uniformly, and this process was established when Chief Janik took office in 2013. So as you've seen, based on the Allegan County GIS, this is based on the parcel number, what we're calling the subject parcel, and obviously as was stated earlier, GIS is not always up to date, so there's some lot lines that need to be redrawn. This is Blue Star Gym, just so you're familiar with where the property is, and this is the hydrant we'll be referencing later in the meeting at the corner of Blue Star and 135th. This is our interpretation of where the development essentially is going. It appears it might be a little bit longer after the lot lines are redrawn, but essentially that's the rough area of where it will be. So this is the original narrative provided to us along with the plans by the developer, and interestingly enough, we're never really directed by a developer on how we conduct our plan reviews. That's up to us to pick the right checklist from the IFC or the NFPA and then conduct the review. These were the plans that, just some of the plans that were submitted to us, so kind of the overall site layout. Just the dimension of the building, so you can see the 5 different buildings, the 4 smaller ones, and then the one that's almost 12,000 square feet that will be what we're under the understanding of basically pole barn construction with nicer exteriors, and proposed as mercantile or storage use was on the plans provided to us. Again, just another site layout, shows the parking plan as well as the 5 different structures proposed, and you'll note that this is called out as Unit 2 for some reason. We're not entirely sure what that means, but we have a suspicion. As you can see, the plans are measured. We utilize plan review software. Typically, sometimes plans are done on paper, but I prefer to do it electronically. As you can see, it's a whole lot easier to measure that his cul-de-sac meets the 96-foot dimension, the road width meets the 20-foot dimension required, and you can see where, as our measurements, it's just about 695 feet from the water main here on Blue Star Highway to the center of the entrance road to the proposed development. It does appear, as you can see in this dimension, that there's room for future development in these 3 areas. And just another picture of the same thing, that while not being proposed currently, it does appear there is space for future development as far as potential fuel load and additional load on fire department resources. Oh, any questions up to that point so far? No? Okay.
We're referencing the International Fire Code. I'd like to point out to the board the purpose of the International Fire Code: to protect people from the death of fire and property loss, the destruction of fire. It's real clear that's the intent of the code. It's also to ensure an adequate water supply to to accomplish that protection. So I want to make that clear. So these are the two codes in dispute as far as interpretation issues. 5071, as far as what's provided, fire flow, fire protection for premises on which the buildings are constructed. Where required, here 50751 shows that on-site hydrant and main shall be provided where the fire code official wants them to be. It's required by the fire code official. Not the builder, not township, the zoning administrator. I'll make that clear. So these are minutes from a planning commission meeting, June 25th. We got these online. The excerpt there is from the actual minutes that references section 107.2, which we believe they didn't mean 107.2. There's a couple of typos in here, and it references C10. Please remember that, C10. And it shows regarding calculating water carrying potential and referencing 1,000 to 2,000 gallons per minute. And the comment from this should be fine since the fire department has 2 3,000 gallon tankers. And there's a fire hydrant close by, Blue Star and 135th in front of Eileen's. So we go into International Fire Code, the appendix, which is adopted by code, areas without water supplies. It references, as you've heard before, NFPA 1142. Okay? Our position is, as authority having jurisdiction, is it's not applicable because there is an adequate and reliable water supply system. Whether we're rural, suburban, or whatever, we have over 600 hydrants in this area. Taxpayers paid for a water main. There is a reliable and adequate water supply. Look at the water reliability study of Cal Lake, excuse me. And as we pointed out, it's less than 700 feet from the entrance to the property. Code references in the Township Planning Committee meeting in the minutes. We want to point out that annex, there's an Annex C reference and an Annex B reference. Please note, these are not part of the requirements of NFPA. That is important to know. It's right there in the code. We would also like to point out in the same minutes a statement about the Planning Commission meeting that the 2 hydrants, the 2 tankers and the hydrant close by, the fire department actually ran calculations using 2 tankers as referenced in the approved minutes. We did calculations on the 2 tankers and the hydrant at the corner of Blue Star Highway and 135th. Based on those calculations, using the formula in C11, not C10, C11, those calculations are right here. 178 gallons per minute. To achieve 1,750 gallons per minute, 10 tankers were required. Please keep this in mind. The minimum fire flow for a residential structure is 1,000 gallons per minute. This is 23,000 square feet. So including fire district tankers and mutual aid agreements, there are about 6 potentially available tankers. This is important for the board to realize. Mutual aid agreements are not guaranteed. It's up there on the screen for your review. I actually reached out to 2 fire chiefs, 2 of the fire chiefs referenced in the mutual aid agreements. I said, I need a guarantee that you're going to supply tankers to a commercial development. And they said, of course, we will not guarantee that. We can't guarantee that. Subject to availability, many things. I would like to point out the county mutual aid agreement, right here. This agreement is not intended to provide for primary response by one party to another party's jurisdiction. That's something you should consider. So, tankers. This is a spreadsheet on tanker out-of-service dates. Just in 2018, as of today, the tankers have been out of service 30 days in 2018. So we don't always have two tankers. As a matter of fact, one of the tankers, 2142, is going in for a 3 to 4 week retrofit for a pump. Something you should know. They aren't always available. Want to point out something right here. Recently there was a fire in Overijssel Township. Overijssel Township dispatched their mutual aid department, requested a tanker. The tanker was unavailable, because actually was out of service for 6 days, their only tanker. Delays occurred, they had to go to another department to fill that void. We actually loaned the department that had a broken down tanker, we loaned them one of our tankers for 6 days. So we went from 2 to 1, something you should know. Here's another interesting point we'd like to bring out to the board. Mutual aid expense. We have heard concern expressed that it's unfair for taxpayers from Douglas, Fenville, Ganges, Cresco, Hamilton, and Saugatuck communities to shoulder the burden of the cost of providing a water supply for fire protection for the project.
Anyway, though, as Chief Janik outlined quite well, in the interest of working alongside Mr. Boscraft and the Build SB project, we did review their method of utilizing only tankers and mutual aid. As you saw earlier, in the calculations we actually ran based on 1142, it does not mathematically work, even if all the mutual aid tankers were available to us. Any questions so far on what we've covered? It gets a little confusing in the calculations.
I do have questions, but maybe let's wait till a little bit.
Okay, sure. Based on our side of it, we provided a summary of the water mains that have been extended within the district. So as you can see, 57 developers have installed over 78,000 feet of water main. That's almost 15 miles of developer-funded water main extensions within the tri-community area. This is just a map from Kalamazoo Lake Sewer and Water Authority. As you can see in the blue, or the light blue, those are all just areas within the township itself where those water mains were extended, not to include the ones in Douglas and Saugatuck City as well. We feel that utilizing that existing hydrant that we referred to earlier at the intersection of Blue Star and 135th is unsafe. It would require shutting down Blue Star Highway for either a tanker shuttle or a large diameter hose lay, and then that ties up us and our traffic control equipment to direct traffic instead of fighting the fire. Additionally, it would require a minimum of 2 law officers to shut the road down, and they're often unavailable due to higher priority calls or increased demand. Another mathematical calculation is friction loss. Based on utilizing just the hydrant and relaying water, if we lay in 700 feet of the 5-inch large diameter hose, you'll notice here that we'll lose 56 psi of pressure from that hydrant to the entrance to the Build SB property. Most typical hydrant pressure is 40 to 60 psi, so that essentially means once we lay that amount of hose, we have 0 water at the entrance of the property. So this ties up an additional 2 engines just to get the pressure up and into the development for firefighting operations. So this is why we feel the water main extension is best. Plus or minus 695 feet from the Blue Star main to the Build SB entrance did not seem unreasonable when compared to the 78,000 feet already installed, or 15 miles by other developers. We still contend that it is the best approach for life safety of the firefighters, the public, and the future occupants at the property. As outlined in the Township Planning Commission minutes from the same June 25th meeting, even they acknowledged that Blue Star and 135th is currently a dangerous intersection. And we still feel that it's unwise for the fire district, the developer, or anyone to risk public safety by utilizing that intersection via tanker shuttle or large diameter hose lay, as it's already dangerous and confusing.
Any questions so far? So 1142, does it apply? In the code it shows the scope of it and the application, the purpose of the standard. Again, Our position is, we feel NFPA 1142 does not apply because there is an adequate and more reliable water supply system. Again, rural, suburban, fire doesn't discriminate between subdivided, rural, or suburban. Fire occurs at any given time. I can only put out the fire with water. That's why there's such an emphasis on that, based on a lot of things. The distance, this building, the unknown contents, is it going to be storage? All these components added in. This isn't a 1,400 square foot pole barn. This is a large site. And the potential for expansion, we believe. We don't know that for sure. Again, does 1142 apply? We actually conducted field tests with 2 tankers. We timed everything. We pulled 3 people out of the field. We spent a great deal of time. And field tests conducted indicate that mutual aid tanker shuttles are not a viable option for water supply. But there are alternatives: on-site water supply, underground tanks, above-ground tanks, ponds. Based on the calculations of 1142, the minimum on-site water supply for structures using the formula out of 1142 was 191,000 plus gallons. This was disclosed to Mr. Beckman. If that was something that was proposed, we would certainly have to look at and review dry hydrant devices. We want to make sure that we have that clear. We would have to look and review at quantity and location of dry hydrants to pull the water out of the pond or the tank.
So to clarify, we have actually offered an alternative. On July 11th, myself, Chief Janik, and Mr. Boscraft met right here in this room, and we offered for him to suggest alternative on-site water supplies. This was followed up again in an email on July 27th for him to still consider submitting plans with alternative on-site water supplies. And as of today, we have yet to receive those. As you know, our role as plan reviewers is simply that, review the plans. Unfortunately, we can't design the project for the builder or the developer, and we did suggest alternative on-site water supplies, but again, have not received anything from that suggestion. So, we're still willing. While we feel the extension of the water main is best in installing pressurized fire hydrants, we feel that'll be the best way to protect ourselves and the public. However, if the developer were to submit a revised plan, including an alternative on-site water supply, we'd be more than happy to review it and consider it. As outlined by the earlier presentation, we did the same for Overijssel Lumber, where they put in the pond within 400 feet of that actual building, I think just 2 years ago. And, you know, we're price sensitive as the next person. That if a pond is more cost effective for the developer than a water main, by all means, if he's willing to suggest it, we're happy to consider it. And as always, you know, safety is our #1 goal. We're here to keep everyone safe, ourselves and the public, no matter what we're doing. And thank you. We appreciate all the volunteer hours you have all spent on getting to this point and hearing our case and continuing to protect our most valuable asset.
And I would like to thank you as well. Any questions for us?
I do have questions. So I think now let's move into question and discussion. Some of the questions I have are just trying to understand, to me, the key issues of discrepancy are, #1, or different interpretations, is does NFPA 1142 apply? And then, depending yes or no, what are the requirements for water supply? And then, what are feasible means of delivering that water supply? So, on the first point, does NFPA 1142 apply? No one, I think, would disagree that it's a rural suburban area. So the question seems like it comes down to, is water supply available? And the applicant says no, you guys say yes. It's not clear, at least, did I get that wrong? Okay, right. Anyway, you know what I mean. So, is there any standards around determining what it means to be available?
Well, one of the things I looked at is even the township's own ordinance. Yes, I acknowledge it is not applicable We did that in writing, 2199 or 2099 is not applicable. However, there is a dimension in there. And that's applicable in rural and suburban, as you say, but yet they'll make them extend the water main if it's subdivided, even though it's, quote, rural or suburban. So you kind of look at that as a kind of a benchmark on, well, they're willing to require that somebody extend the water main, you know, if it's within 2,700 feet away.
So that 2,700, that's, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you determine whether it's available or not? And, you know, does it need to be within 300 feet, does it need to be within 3,000 feet? So where does the 2,700 feet number, 2,700 feet?
That's something that the township has drafted, and something that is the township ordinance. We have the right to reference that ordinance by International Fire Code, but as it was declared, we understand it is not applicable, so then the Fire Code assumes the role of the governing body and the enforcement code standard. But I guess when you look at, when you consider the project, and you consider the fact that if you do classify this, if it becomes a storage is a very precarious occupancy. And if it is declared a storage, you don't know what's in there. It could be boat storage, which is gasoline, diesel, petroleum-based, fiberglass, and propane. So you have those elements of unknown. Again, the size of the project, the exposures are less than 50 feet, so they have to be considered part of the whole site. So you add that all up together and conclude, I need a pressurized water supply. The first out truck on that fire will be an aerial, because it's commercial. That's our protocol. So an aerial ladder will go out. The ladder needs a lot of water. It is very difficult to supply an aerial ladder from experience with a tanker shuttle. Consider this. You're going to have 6 to 8 tankers on that area right there. What happens in wintertime? What happens in the summer? The congestion that's around that really just adds to the complexity and the danger of that project. That's why the code reverts to, let's get a hydrant within 400 feet of the building so we don't have long hose lays. Another element you need to consider, how much time is it going to take to set up relays? Please consider that. So setting up...
Just for a point of clarification for everyone, I want to make sure everybody's comparing apples to apples. I think when you're talking about water supply, implicit in that is public water supply. But in fact, water supply isn't limited to public water supply. Is that correct?
That is correct. Alternatives, there are alternatives. There's types of water supplies.
Right.
But it sounds like, according to IFC, it is not clear of, they do not define what it means to be available. Is that right, within IFC? Does it need to be right at the property entrance? Can it be 500 feet away? Can it be 3,000 feet away? That's not clear within IFC, is that correct?
Correct. It's left up to determination by the fire code official.
We do know from experience that, for example, one project in one of the jurisdictions, they extended the main 3,000 feet. Other ones were 50 feet. It varies based on the project. Somebody sleeping there? Is it an R1 type, like a hotel? All these elements come into play.
I think a similar development to the Build SB project is currently the building's going up near exit 36, if you may have seen. I think it's called Just Barnes Drive. And while the water main was extended years ago, and to be honest, that was prior to me here, but they put in over 3,000 feet of water main to build a very similar sized building and hydrants to their commercial development. So that it's, you know, we're not trying to go off on a limb here and do something that hasn't been done previously. This is very much uniformly to what has been followed by the fire district prior to both of us. So.
Can I ask
I still think the nature of this appeal is the code been incorrectly interpreted? And we're talking about two separate codes. And you gave your side on the IFC and believe and they gave NFPA their side. I think what we need to do is our due diligence and figure out what fits this. I mean, I have a lot of disagreements with some of the things both of you said. We cannot rely on mutual aid. I mean, I think that is, I don't want my house relying on mutual aid, sorry. You don't know what happens in Hamilton and Grascop themselves. That's just my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with the interpretation of which code we should be looking at.
And I think which interpretation comes down to the question of, is it rural suburban? The answer is yes. The other piece of that, is there a water supply available? You guys say there is a water supply available, though it's not, there is not a clear number within the IFC that says what determines available versus not.
Correct, it's not quantitative yet.
So I guess I have a question for the applicant where your position is the water supply is not available. What is that based on? Just that it's not there right at the entrance?
How many feet away is that?
Yes. I mean, I think if you look to the division of authority here, the township has the authority to do certain things. And one of those things is to require property owners, under certain circumstances, to pay what is a municipal cost. I mean, let's just be honest about that. Providing municipal water is a municipal cost. Under certain circumstances, if a developer wants to come in and do something particular, that the township says, you know what, if you're going to do that, you're going to divide land, if you're going to do something like that, and the water main is close enough, we can make you extend it. That express statement of when it's appropriate in Saugatuck Township means that it is not appropriate for the fire chief to step over and take that authority.
My question to you is, why didn't they give you the authority to build if they have that? It came back to these guys to review it.
They gave us authority to build, except for, they did say we need fire approval.
Because they're not experts.
But they also did say NFPA 1142 applies. Please analyze it under that section. So the township has sounded off on this. And their sound off is very clear. You do not have to extend the water main. That is ours to do. The fire chief can't force that.
And I'm sympathetic to that, to a point, and that's why I've asked for water flows from the chief to have you guys consider putting a pond on site. And it went nowhere. And it's frustrating to me, because I'm the township resident, representative from the township. I'm on the fire board, and I'm in the middle of this back and forth, which, you know, I like to compromise things, and as a township resident, I wish they'd run the water main all the way around that corner. We have a camp around the corner that has children staying there at night. My kids used to stay there. That was before I was on the fire board. That terrifies me. We should as a township, but that's besides the point. What else is going to go on at North Shore with a well? I heard somewhere that they were going to build a well. Wouldn't there be adequate water supply out of a well to supply North Shore and this development? I know they're commingling.
Well, just to touch on that, North Shore has given the township, which is part of the Kalamazoo Water Supply. I don't know. There's a long acronym, and I don't know what it all stands for. But we've given them the ability to go put a well out there. Just given them the option to have land for, I think it's $1 or $10. I don't know. And yes, so if that ever happens, likely the water will be extended a bunch of other places. But that's not our,
right,
as a single property owner, our responsibility to do. If the water is not at the property, water is not available, period. That's what the township says, and it falls under their jurisdiction to make that determination. With that information, then, of course, the ball is kicked over to the fire district to determine what to do after it's determined that there is not water there. That's a township issue. That is not a fire district issue.
So I guess so knowing that your initial proposal was extend the water main to this property, do you agree that that is a township decision to extend it or not, or that they have approval on that?
I don't know, that seems a bit biased. It doesn't seem to be appropriate. The township, the water supply is to be approved by the fire code official. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, if I can. I don't think there's no dispute that the fire district has no authority to demand the extension of a public utility system over which it doesn't maintain control. That's not debatable. The fire district's, or the fire code official's duty in this case is to see that 507.1 is fulfilled. It doesn't, as I said before, it does not have to be a public system. There has to be an approved water supply. In this case, the applicant has proposed 2 tankers and a hydrant plus mutual aid. I would suggest the question then is that an approved water supply? And should it, even if you analyze it under NFPA 1142 or B103, is it adequate or not? And if what I've just stated is a misstatement of the applicant's position, I would welcome them to correct me.
So let's move on from there. So, application of NFPA 1142 feels like, so if we said it is rural suburban, there is no water access available because the fire district does not have the authority to require the applicant to extend the water main, and the township has said that they're not going to require that extension, right? So then it comes down to what are the water supply requirements, and what are the appropriate means of, or viable means of achieving that.
Yeah, and I believe, I believe the burden is on the applicant. I mean, the fire chief, his job is to review the proposal that's made. Okay, in this case, again, unless I'm mistaken, my understanding is the proposal is we don't have water, you can't require public water to be extended, so we want you to analyze our proposal on tankers plus hydrant plus mutual aid.
Okay, and we analyzed that, this fire department analyzed that, and mutual aid is not, they have, other people in other townships have no jurisdiction here. They can come or they can't come. I mean, we have overlapping calls constantly, and so do they. So to rely on mutual aid as part of the formula for having enough water, we can't do that. Is the way I see it. We can't rely on other communities to supply our water to our fires. And we don't have enough water in 2 tankers to supply a fire in that large building, that large commercial building. I mean, water supply just is not there with 2 tankers.
What if we're out mutual aiding someone else?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the common sense question.
And I
We
think
do it all the
that's why
time.
this is left up to the fire chief. He has to consider all those factors in whether or not we could fight a fire there. I think there's a lot of factors. The Blue Star Highway is not a rural road. I'm sorry. The Blue Star Highway is the trunk into Saugatuck and Douglas. It's not a rural highway. It's a very busy highway in the summer, and that's a very complicated corner. So my question to the builder is, how are you going to get water across that highway? And how are you going to close it? Because the
Well, they're not
township,
going to.
the fire
We are.
the fire department also closes highways. So it's left up to Greg to tell you how that fire's going to be fought.
To answer your question, if you drive down Blue Star Highway, what side of the hydrant's on? The east side, right?
Mhm.
All of them. I don't know of a single hydrant on the west side. There might be?
Buster Construction, Douglas has one.
Okay, all right. So, if pumping water across Blue Star Highway is suddenly inappropriate, we have a bunch of buildings that are gonna be left high and dry and burning if anything ever happens.
So, because it can happen one place, it's okay to have it happen there too. Is that what you're saying to me?
Let's look at this.
No, I'm asking a question.
I'll tell you, I've been in I travel for a living. I drive 60,000 miles a year. I've been rerouted around fire scenes. I'm not that freaked out about that. I'm more freaked out about you relying on mutual aid, which we can't guarantee to be there, and then our guys running 700 and whatever feet of hose, and knowing the static loss, by the time they get there, we're gonna set up a pumper in between, and a pumper, by the time we get there, your building's in flames, and now the fire's going next door, and the next door, and going either way, which way the wind blows. Look what's going on in California. It's not just about your property, it's about everybody's. So that's my point there. I don't care if we close down Blue Star. I volunteer to put my car out there and direct traffic by my house. I don't care about that. I care about water supply to your facility to make sure no one gets hurt and no one else around it gets hurt.
That's a fair observation. And I think we have two hydrants that are close enough for relaying water with a pumper. We have, in the letter that I had referenced earlier, that identified the pumpers that can pump 1,250 gallons per minute, 1,500 gallons per minute, 2,000 gallons per minute. These are the pumpers that...
Do the math real quick. How many gallons do we have there?
That would be gallons per minute, pumping capacity?
No, gallons of water, how many would we have there? How quick are these guys gonna get rid of that?
No, I mean for relaying from the hydrants.
Okay.
So it's a large diameter hose, as NFPA 1142 says, large diameter hose from the hydrant to a pumper to get the pressure up. That is done all the time. You saw that diagram. I mean, that's...
Did you ever see it work?
Excuse me?
Have you ever watched that?
The diagram?
No, have you ever watched them relay water to a fire?
Yes. I'm not claiming I have any expertise in firefighting. I'm not saying that. No. But that's what is, and in this letter, Chief Janik writes, we can pump 750 feet before relaying becomes necessary through another pumper. Okay? So
Is that a true statement then?
Yeah, we keep around 700, 800 feet, 750 is a fair statement, right? And that's how we decided we would have a pumper at the hydrant 135th, because it's a straight line.
Right.
And then have another pumper at the entrance. But again, as I've said before, that's all great in theory, that's all just fine, okay? What you gotta consider is the time it takes to establish a viable water supply. And I'm not so sure everyone is taking that in consideration. The time and manpower. Meanwhile, as soon as you stretch across that roadway, there goes two of my personnel, because they've got to block that hose. You drive over the hose, you burst it, what happens? If I have people inside, why do we want to take those risks? I completely sympathize about the cost of this. But this code didn't evolve since this was on the table. Code was adopted in 2001, 2002. It's been like that. So it puts us in a precarious position when we have somebody else making the decisions on our strategies and tactics. I'm not taking that personal, none of my guys do. We know what has to be done. We're the fire code officials. We know how to fight fire. Give us a chance.
I got one thing to say. You brought up a lot of good examples of where we didn't follow this. And I know there's a little bit of leeway with the chief to figure out what he wants to do. That's why I asked him at one point, can we put a pond there, save the developer, well, at one point, someone said $1,000 a foot, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to go in that business, but no, it came back to close to $100 a foot. But he has the leeway to accept a pond or even running to the end of the driveway if he feels that's acceptable and not all the way back there. I just think that we are looking at black and white, and I want you guys to think outside the box. I hate to use that term, but there's a lot of examples of where they did do it, 15 miles or something, where they made the developers run it.
But that does not mean that this developer that same requirement can be placed on this developer. I don't know those other instances whether they were subdividing the property. If they were subdividing the property, they can demand that somebody runs it 2,699 and a half feet.
I'm sure some were. I agree with you there.
This is one property. And I don't know where we are procedurally. At some point, again, we're doing this kind of back and forth, and I'd like the chance to respond, not just to questions whenever their presentation is officially done. But I think we're looking at this. I mean, the other instances are relevant. And to talk again about Blue Star Highway, and well, if we close that, there goes 2 more guys. I mean, that's the reality, as Mr. Beckman said. That happens, and that's going to happen all across the township and the cities. Fire hoses are going to be stretched across roads, period. That's going to happen.
So I think we're supposed to be talking about a viable water source. And that's the question. And the rest of it doesn't matter. I don't think we have a viable water source.
I think it's important too to note that yes, all the hydrants are on the east side of Blue Star. You are correct, but we didn't have anything to do with that development or that water main being put in, or the buildings like ours that was built in 1976 on this side of Blue Star Highway. But that's what the purpose of the fire code is to improve going forward, to continue to prevent and protect the public, not just do it the way it always has been done because that's the way it always has been done. Additionally, if we do hook that hydrant and close Blue Star Highway, the other thing to consider is now every incoming truck, whether it's ours or mutual aid, has to park on Blue Star Highway, and the air-packed personnel have to hike in the 700 feet and then the 1,200 to the building, because now we can't get our trucks close enough since the hose just cut off our access. So it's not just the water supply, it's several other firefighting tactics that are affected by that hose being laid in our way.
Okay, so let's look at the options again for a water supply. Number 1, extend the water main. That's out. Number 2 is use the existing hydrants. The applicant says that's possible. You guys say it's not, and I think we have to respect and appreciate your expertise and the amount of due diligence and calculations you put into exploring that option. So if that's out, I guess the question then is there another alternative to get an appropriate water supply? Has that been explored?
And to your response, here's what I would suggest happens. I understand that I and the developer don't have the expertise of hooking a hose up to a tanker and seeing how much pressure comes out, okay? But you also didn't hear tonight, or you weren't shown any numbers or test results. You were told, we've looked into it, it won't work. That was the response. And respectfully, that's the response that Mr. Beckman got that was not quite a full answer. So, if we're going to look into this, let's look into it. I would assume that this board wants consistency and not arbitrary or capricious application of the fire code to different people within the jurisdiction. I have to say that we can agree on that, I would hope. And so what we've shown is that that is not occurring. If it's appropriate, and if that's the determination that this board makes, is can we get the appropriate water supply from those hydrants and from a couple tankers, maybe not all of them, because we don't want to rely, as you said, on mutual aid exclusively. Can we get that? Let's get an independent analysis of it done. It's that easy.
I guess that's just as, we did show the calculations, just to clarify, they are actually, right there. So this is out of NFPA 1142. We spent, again, 3 guys spent close to probably 3 or 4 hours calculating it. You can see the dump time, the fill time, how long it takes to drive. The way NFPA 1142 outlines it, you can't just drive past one another, back up and turn around. You have to go in a loop, so this involves going down to 65th, past Pine Trail Camp, back out to Blue Star to refill at the hydrants. And as you can see, each 3,000-gallon tanker can still only supply 178 gallons per minute. So the calculations are right here. We have spent the time, and I guess if they would like to pay for an independent person to do these same calculations, by all means. I don't think we're going to get any different calculations based on the same formula than if someone from the outside would, but.
There's no relay calculations there. That's simply.
This was using the tanker shuttles, you know, using mutual aid, which was referenced quite a bit. And again, we used NFPA 1142 C11, the actual formula within the code, and we actually did the field testing to determine how long is it going to take to dump, fill, get to the entrance to the site, then do a round, go to the hydrant, which is what NFPA 1142 says to do. You aren't to be doing this opposing, you're to go around. So all those factors were put in, and you can see the formula's right there. We didn't create that formula. We followed it and entered the numbers to arrive at the conclusion of this is what we need. And we cannot, I hope this is on the record, we cannot put out a fire in a commercial building this size with 1,000 gallons per minute. We cannot do it.
So if NFPA applies, is 1,000 gallons per minute the requirement according to that?
Not according to us, not according to the International Fire Code, is actually 3,000 gallons per minute, based on the type of construction and the size.
And isn't 1,000 gallons a minute for a residential building?
Correct. That's the minimum for a residential, up to 3,600 square feet on a home.
And
Most
this
homes
is how large?
23,000 collectively between the 5 buildings,
The code,
approximately.
the code considers it all one site because each building is less than 50 feet from another one. So that's included in the calculation. We followed that, and then we had each other cross-check on a check and balance situation.
Can we pause for a second and get back on track? I'm new at this, I don't know anything.
Where's your gavel?
Okay. So I want to first make sure before we continue discussing that there's not a presentation by other parties. So are there other parties who would like to? Sure.
Thank you.
No other parties, so let's continue.
Yeah, no, I will.
Oh, go ahead.
My name is Alan Vanderlaan. I'm an attorney for the fire district in response to a lawsuit filed by Mr. Gabriel's. To me, this is extremely easy. You have to look at Mr. Gabriel's appeal. He has 4 issues. First issue, he says we've mandated him to pay for extending water from that fire hydrant across the street that we mandated. That's not true. We haven't. Boom, there goes that issue. We haven't done that. It would be maybe a good idea, I don't know, but that issue is gone. He says that we've refused to allow him to choose and propose an approved water supply. That's not true either. We would like him to propose water supplies. It's his burden to do so. We've suggested some alternatives, and a pond is a great idea if he wants to propose that. Is forget the independent studies. That's not our burden. Why are we going to pay for that? The only thing the chief has to do is approve the water supply. It's up to him to propose it. So he could do so, and we've not prevented him from doing that. The third issue he has is that we've required fire hydrants. That's not true. We haven't. So we don't have to deal with that issue. And finally, he said that our calculations are incorrect. Okay, what are yours? Come up with yours. Let us know what they are. These are our calculations. Again, the fire chief or the fire official approves the water supply. It's his job. It may be somewhat subjective and based on a lot of things, but approved means acceptable to that fire official. So what he believes is acceptable based upon his experience, his training, his education, that's what happens. So I suggest that Bill SB start coming up with alternative water supplies, submit those to the fire chief. He'll take a look at them. I'm sure he'll work, as he has done with others, to come up with a solution. And but as far as their big thing on appeal, that we've mandated that they go across, that's off the table. Mr. Gabriel, you won on that one. So that's not something we're mandating. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir, what was your name?
Oh, Alan Vanderlaan.
Okay, and representing?
Oh, I represent the township just in the, I was the law.
No,
in the
no,
fire,
no.
fire district in the lawsuit.
In the
filed by
lawsuit that just was, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so moving into discussion officially.
Discussions. I would ask for an opportunity to respond. That's not.
Just pull that up. It's just not there.
Thank you. Starting with, Mr. Vanderlaan's comments, and I appreciate that. I think it's clear from the reviews that we got that the fire chief was mandating those things. It did not say, please propose water main and hydrants or something else. It said, your revised plans must have a water main on them. It sounds like the fire district's attorney is acknowledging that that is not proper and that it's off the table. And I do appreciate that. I won't argue that anymore. A couple comments. One, there was a comment by Chief Janik that storage is a precarious business. I would simply point out the standard that's being applied to the example that I showed of Blue Star Storage, where they weren't even requiring a hydrant within 400 feet. That's close enough. Just put an access drive and reduce the distance so that it's close. The comment about future development is neither here nor there. This is a discussion about one parcel and buildings going up on it. As far as what may happen on other parcels, I mean, that's like saying, the first person that builds a house on their road, well, this is nice property. There may be some more that are down here. Why don't you pay to extend municipal services to your house so that others down the road can benefit from it as well? That's not appropriate.
I think that's fair enough.
The NFPA says that the rate per minute that needs to occur is, I thought I had it and I just lost it, I apologize. Let me try it this way. is 1,000 gallons per minute. That's what's applicable. And I think after you make that determination, here's where you get it. It's not 3,000, it's not 1,000 for residential and something else for commercial. It's 1,000. That's the number that has to be met.
I feel like you need to see the context of this table.
Yeah.
Sure, sure. And that's a good time for me to hand out. This includes the first package in each bundle would be the slides. The second would be the page or two.
We could share.
Yeah. The second would be the supporting documents. So I can reference you to the page where that table is. If I can find it. Page 9. Down at the bottom it says Build SB, page such and such of 42, right in the center. So page 9 is the water delivery rate table. And that's in the NFPA.
And this is 1142, right?
Yes.
Which is different than the IFC.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So there's conflicting numbers here, right?
Well, that's why we need to make the determination
Right, exactly.
of which applies. So, and our position is that we are clearly in the camp of NFPA 1142, 1,000 gallons per minute, what the table says. Now, as far as...
Now, wait a minute, right above your nice little chart there, the AHJ shall be permitted to adjust the water delivery rate given consideration to local conditions and needs. Once again, we have a condition where a hydrant is across the street, and we only have one hydrant.
And we have a 13,000 square foot building.
The actual.
And the minimum water delivery rate shall not be less than 250 gallons per minute, which I believe on your calculations showed it was 170 something.
If you actually, and I do have an SC 1142 is what he just provided you, if you actually read up to section 4.2, or 4.2.1, and then actually in this case 4.3.1, because of the exposure hazards, that's actually the code section that applies. 4.6.1 is just outlining the absolute minimum we need to be able to deliver. But following the calculation of the water supply minimum based on the occupancy type and the construction type is where we came up with the 190-some thousand gallons of water based on those structures. So.
Yeah,
We're talking about two different things. One is total water supply and one is gallons per minute. So to say 191,000 gallons, that's not 191,000 gallons per minute.
Right.
That's
Sure.
used then to calculate how much needs to be supplied per minute, the delivery rate. And that's where we are. And Mr. Beckman, yes, discretion of the township or the fire chief, but I think it's appropriate then to look what he's done in other cases and you as the board to determine whether this is being applied equally and fairly or not. And if there is a precarious storage unit down the street from here that does not require the same to-the-letter requirements as this development, that should cause you a little bit of pause.
Well, with all due respect, I don't know that that is the issue before us to determine. Just like I don't think it is our issue to think about what is the potential future of this property. I also don't think it's the case, or our charge in this case, to look at how do we interpret this in the past or apply it in the past. We're looking at how do we apply IFC and the applicable codes to this particular case in the best way. Is that a fair?
And I agree.
The appeal is that he is fire code official has incorrectly interpreted the codes. That's technically the question in front of you.
In this particular case.
In this particular.
And what we have is one person saying we need to use NFP 1142, and one person saying the IFC.
Correct.
So.
And I guess
And he's
I'm
not on trial for all the other things in the township.
Right, so if I grant you that, then perhaps Mr. Vanderlaan, that's the issue where in a civil lawsuit, that would certainly be the fodder for misappropriate application on a discriminatory basis. So if that's what the Board of Appeals is going to say in this case, is I'm going to apply it in this case, well, then looking at past ones would fuel that a legal liability, potentially not in the...
Well, that's between you and whatever, and the judge. We are not judges. We are here to look at the code has been incorrectly interpreted.
Sure.
And all you guys are doing is giving us your information on it. The chief is giving us his information, and we will determine if the code was interpreted correctly.
Or-
Not precedents or anything in the future. That's why I agreed with you about what else is being on that property. I don't care. I'm worried about this incident at this time, at this date. So,
And here is our calculations that were performed with information and classifications and occupancy hazard risks from our engineers as to this building. And we don't get 191,000. We get, depending on which occupancy hazard you use, 40, 50 to 60,000 gallons total required for fighting this fire. And the calculation, the proper calculation is for the largest building on the site. So we've got one building that's a large building, and then there's 4 buildings around it. You increase the calculation based on a hazard if it's within so many other feet of another building. But you don't increase the hazard and then also calculate each building separately and add it all together. That's counting it twice, okay? So the calculation is based on the largest building on the site and the hazard, the existing hazard, because there's other buildings near it. And here's the calculations you come up with. And again, the fact is we have not seen any calculations that show how these 2 fire hydrants cannot supply the water needed. Or, I mean, if we're going...
2 fire hydrants.
The 2 fire hydrants, yes. Did I misspeak? There's one on 65th and one on...
The one that I pointed out that you guys didn't know about? Is that what we're talking about?
No, the one on 65th. That's around...
Off the road
yes,
corner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
So are those, is that a dead-end main? I mean, I'm asking a question for
It
you
runs
guys.
down 65th to
And
hit
stop.
Dunes, and then goes on.
Okay.
You know, I guess that one is even further away, because you have to go up to
Around.
Blue Star, along Blue Star on
Well,
134th.
I guess, I don't want to say anything if they're, I guess that hydrant, which is on personal property, you know, you've asked other people to build easements, that could shorten the distance to tie into that one if you had an easement.
That would be a good alternative as well.
That's what I guess that's my frustration with all this, is going back and forth and no one's coming up with solutions. It's just my way or that way and we're done. The other thing that I get frustrated at is I'm looking at minimums. I don't know about you, but I don't put the minimum insurance on my house or the minimum insurance on my car. I want to make damn sure it's fixed right if it happens. So I get real nervous when I see minimums, because it looks to me like people are trying to cut corners, and I have a problem with that. So, but I know it's still, you know, it's part of the law, so we'll go from there.
I'd still say this is about adequate water supply, and if Chief says that mutual aid is not an adequate water supply, which I totally agree with him, sorry, you need to give us an adequate water supply. You have not done that yet. If you throw out everything, I want to know where your adequate water supply is coming
Sure,
from.
okay, and I'll answer that as simply as I can. 2 hydrants relaying and tankers.
But we don't have enough tankers to get us an adequate water supply. We only have 2. It's been said, I can't tell you how many times, 5 to 6.
But we have 2 hydrants, which apparently put out 1,200 gallons per minute. With relaying, with a pumper that can pump 1,250 to 2,000 gallons per minute. There's adequate supply there.
It's just so unclear, using that method of 2 hydrants, equipment that's available, gallons per minute that are required, total quantities required, your calculations say that's not enough water.
Please keep this in mind. You have a hydrant main that's connected. You pull 1,300 or 1,200 gallons per minute out of this one. You're not going to get 1,200 or 1,300 gallons on the same line. It's not 2,600 gallons per minute. It doesn't work.
Right, but one at 1,200 is enough. So if the other one adds additional to it, maybe both of them are at 800 then.
I guess that's your opinion that it's enough.
Well, that's what the code says.
But you're not fighting the
No,
front.
no, but that's what NFP 1142 says. So that's what we're relying on, is the fact that those 2 hydrants can supply enough, and you have tankers on top of that. I mean, so you're right, Mr. Beckman, minimum, we meet the minimum with the hydrants there. Tankers add an additional level of support.
Well, I will agree with Mr. Vanderlaan, the burden of proof is really on you guys to show us. Maybe you need to do an independent study with those 2 hydrants and let us know what you came up with.
Well,
But
maybe that observation is fair.
But that's not, that goes away from why we're here.
Well,
Was it incorrectly interpreted?
well, but to get to somewhere else, I mean, what written document did we have? We had a written document that said you must do this and you must do this, not come to us with proposals. So we had no choice to appeal that, if for nothing else than to get out from under it. So I mean, if that's where you're going to come down and say, you know what, the burden is on us to come up with another proposal, then
Didn't you receive an email in August asking for an alternate water supply? I believe you did.
July 27th, actually.
July.
And basically the response was, I feel you can do it with your tankers and your mutual aid agreements. So we did go through the calculations as we showed you and proved that unfortunately that still didn't work, but yet we still have yet to receive an alternative suggestion from them.
The reviews we have, 3 of them in a row. Review number 1, 2, and 3, the latest a few weeks ago, is put main and hydrant detail on your plans, period. That's what we have. And we can't, I mean, that doesn't say, give us an alternative proposal. It says, do this. So if that's where you're going, we at least need you to clarify and get us out from under that mandate, which I think we've all agreed is not proper.
I think where we're at, and I'll tell you where I'm at and tell me if you agree, is that the fire district cannot require a water main extension because the township has to approve that, which they do not. Second is the other solution or potential solution of using existing hydrants in the calculations and requirements calculated by our fire district say that's not a viable solution. I think we have to, unless that is proven otherwise, I think we have to assume that is true, and then that leads to what are alternative solutions.
Can I make one suggestion? In terms of your initial comment that fire district cannot require the extension of public water, I disagree. Under 5071, we most certainly can. That's what has in fact been required here, although we will consider alternatives. I don't even see how that's debatable.
Didn't you say earlier that the township has to approve?
No, he said that.
No, that was Mr. Slugger. The township,
I said we don't control the public water supply. I acknowledge we don't control the public water supply. They would have to get permission, like any developer, from Cal Lake to extend the line. I mean, but certainly can we say you have to have it? Yeah. And then if they don't agree, they can bring an alternative. That's the way it's done. I mean, this isn't debatable. Of course we can require it. 5071 could not be clearer. The burden is on them to provide an approved water supply system. They say, no, it doesn't exist, therefore we don't have to do anything. No, they have to do that.
5071 does not say you can mandate that they extend the water supply. 5071 says they can mandate that you have an approved water supply.
An approved water supply, quote, shall be provided to the premises, close quote.
If IFC is applicable, yes. The fire chief cannot tell us that it has to be a water main versus a pond, or a reservoir, or a tank.
And I would argue, and I don't want to get into a debate, I don't think there's any question but the IFC is applicable. No one in this room doesn't think the IFC is applicable.
And my feeling is we need to table this, and we need more information from the person who is applying.
More information on which piece.
Yeah, how they're gonna provide a water supply.
In my opinion, we need to determine, us three, need to determine if the code was incorrectly interpreted. What they do after that is their problem. So is it it's up to us to say, yes, it was interpreted correctly, go back to the drawing board, or no, we're gonna follow 1142. But we're off subject here, there's already a lawsuit, but our job as a board of review is to strictly look at that check box and determine if it was interpreted correctly. Not, bring ponds in. I think you should have done that a long time ago. If we would have had some communication with our zoning board, and shame on the township zoning board, you put that in the minutes, I don't care, that we don't communicate between the fire department, the zoning board, and the developer. This should have been done a long time ago.
With that comment, which I think maybe is right on point, here's what I would request then on behalf of the developer, that this board conclude that the fire code was improperly applied to require the extension of a main or to the property, to conclude that NFPA 1142 applies, and then with that, then as you say, the developer is back to the drawing board to supply additional information on how they're going to meet that standard. And I would submit that.
And I'm sure they want us to say that the IFC was, rightfully watched, and we're not requiring you to run a water main. Adequate water supply, correct?
Approved.
Approved.
Which could mean a hydrant, a pond, an above-ground tank, any of the above. It's what is the fire code official willing to approve? So, and that's where our position would be, it was correctly applied because we were willing to approve a water main extension. But anyway, we're going back and forth here.
And I'm not trying to belabor this. If I can make a suggestion, you had a fair amount of information both from the fire district, as well as the applicant presented to you for the first time tonight.
Yes.
I know you didn't see some of this information, certainly not to the degree. I don't think, if you wanted, it would certainly not be inappropriate to simply say, okay, we're going to meet again in a week, and that'll give us a chance to review what's here. In the meanwhile, if you have any information you want, blah, blah, blah.
To be honest, I don't feel like we need that. I feel like we're at a spot where, well, I guess first, do you guys disagree that NFPA 1142 applies?
Do we disagree that it applies?
Do you, well,
It depends on how you're gonna look at the project. There's no doubt in my mind, International Fire Code was not incorrectly interpreted. It was interpreted the correct way, we followed that. We had nothing else offered in writing as far as an alternative water supply. So we went down a route.
I would agree with Mr. Sluggett that I'd like to digest this. And unfortunately, I have a full-time job, and this is gonna take a while. And I need to understand where your guys' stance are. Just because I'm on the fire board, I want you to know that I'm objective, and I'm gonna stay that way. And I'm also a township resident. I want to make sure this gets done properly, but I don't want to just sit here and say, I'm ruling this way, or this is my vote, without looking at this.
And I want adequate time to look at this. I think a week is not enough. This process has rushed, and I want time to look at this, I want time to digest this.
And we can't even get together to discuss it.
Yeah, and it's
Because-
very difficult for all of us to find a time that we can meet. We all work.
I mean, I can't call Aaron and say, hey, what do you think about this? Because it constitutes a quorum, and we can't even talk about it. Now, I can call Greg, I can call you, I can call Mr. Sluggett, but I just think we need some time to digest this.
Okay.
So I move we table.
You need to close the hearing first, I think, don't you?
Okay.
Just trying to follow the minutes.
Do you have a motion to close the hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
I'll support.
All in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, so in terms of action, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to hold for at least 30 days.
Any discussion on that? Go ahead.
I would encourage you to come up with a date specific.
That's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
Okay, 30 days from now.
Well, it's... Does the night work better for everyone, keeping in mind, I'm usually gone on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I canceled my trip tonight to be here. Usually the beginning and the end of the weeks are better for me.
So I would say somewhere around October 24th.
That's a Wednesday, can we make it a Thursday?
Okay, October
Yeah,
25th.
we would have training that night here technically already.
Okay, October 25th.
Does that work for you?
As of right now, it does, but who knows what comes up
Yeah.
along the way.
Somewhere around October 25th. I don't know.
But we would have to announce it anyway. How much time do we have to announce a board meeting?
18 hours.
18 hours, okay. Well, that's what I'm good with that.
Can I just, I guess, ask, what are we gonna do in 30 days? Knowing that we can't meet on it.
I'm gonna read this
Okay.
and try to figure out what everybody's talking about. I would hope for some more information. If you think the chief's calculations aren't adequate, I would like more information. And I would like an adequate water supply suggested.
Well, I kind of feel with Aaron is, I could do this in 2 weeks instead of 30 days. But if we could, I mean, just to be fair to, although they gotta understand we are volunteers, to be fair to the developer that probably wants to get moving on the project, but
He's gonna be on vacation.
And 2 weeks would also be the week of our open house, which is not exactly timely for us either, if that works, to push it out.
Can we do the 18th, the week before that?
let's do the 18th.
Okay. Is that an official
Same time,
motion?
same
Okay.
place.
Okay.
I
So
move
that-
we reconvene on October 18th.
6 p.m. here?
So motion,
Second.
Mr. Flain, second by Beckman.
Second.
To-
Forgot I had to do
to-
this. No choice.
So-
All in favor of reconvening? Sorry,
No, go ahead.
All in favor of reconvening on October 18th?
Yeah.
Yes.
All opposed? Okay.
If there's assuming either side may want to submit some additional information, I would encourage you to give them a drop dead date, and I would make it at least a week before.
Before,
Right.
So,
I like that October 11th, the drop dead date for any additional
Information.
materials,
Yeah.
calculations, I'm sorry,
The date
October
was-
11, drop dead date for any additional material, well, you're the chairman,
No,
sorry.
that sounds good. You're the vice chairman, so.
Oh, that's right.
Was that a motion then, for the rest of the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
The motion by Russell, second by Beckman, to table until the October 18th, 2018 meeting at 6:00 PM, and additional materials must be submitted no later than October 11th, 2018.
That's good. Long motion. Okay, any other public comments?
You want to finish the vote?
Yeah, we have
Sorry.
I thought we were.
Unless I missed it, I'm sorry.
No.
That's my motion.
Second by me. Second.
All right, all in favor of that particular motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
All opposed? Any public comments? Other topics? Any Board of Appeal member comments?
I think I've said it all.
Jane? Okay, with that, we are adjourned.